Night is kind to most cars. It hides awkward proportions, softens edges, and turns ordinary shapes into anonymous shadows. But some cars stay sharp, even in the half-light. A long hood, a low shoulder line, a slim chrome grille cutting through the darkness, lines so clean they feel inevitable. This is the story of the BMW 507, a hand-built V8 Roadster that was supposed to conquer America and rescue BMW's image in the 1950s and instead nearly bankrupted the company. A car whose sales were a disaster, whose costs spiraled out of control, and which only much later turned into one of the most valuable BMWs ever built. Tonight, in the Car Story Vault, we open the file marked 507. We'll follow it from an idea in the mind of an American importer, through design sketches on a New York desk, to the showroom floors of Munich and Manhattan, and into the barn where Elvis Presley's 507 slept for decades before coming back to life. So settle in. Imagine a late-night gas station somewhere on a German autobahn. In 1958, fluorescent lights buzzing, insects circling, and a white BMW Roadster ticking itself cool after a fast run. Its curves are perfect, its sound unforgettable, and its timing for BMW almost fatal. The 507 begins, oddly, not in Munich, but in New York. Max Hoffman, the influential Austrian-born importer who had already helped bring Mercedes and Porsche to the US, believed there was a gap in the American market. On one side, the Mercedes Benz 300 SL, fast, expensive, exclusive. On the other, small British roadsters like MGs and Triumphs, charming but cheap and underpowered. Hoffman's idea was simple and seductive. BMW, still rebuilding after the war, could create a glamorous V8 Roadster that sat right in the middle, more affordable than a 300 SL, more sophisticated than the British cars. He pushed BMW's management hard. In 1954, he convinced them to develop a sports car based on the company's existing 501 and 502 V8 saloons, using their mechanicals but wrapped in a body that could turn heads on Sunset Boulevard and Fifth Avenue. Internal sketches from BMW's Nürburgring development department were promising but conservative. Hoffman wasn't impressed. On his recommendation, the project's styling was sent across the Atlantic to a designer working in New York, a man who would give the 507 its timeless face. Albrecht von Goertz was no ordinary stylist. A German aristocrat living in the US and a former student of industrial design legend Raymond Loewy. He had an eye for clean, modern forms. BMW gave Goertz two jobs. One was to design a larger, elegant coupe that would become the BMW 503. The other was to create a two-seat roadster on the same basic mechanicals, the car that would become the 507. Goertz's 507 is all about proportion. A long, low hood, leading to BMW's twin-kidney grille, now slim and horizontal rather than upright. Front wings that flow into a gently rising shoulder line. A cockpit set back over the rear axle, with thin pillars and a removable hardtop optional for those who wanted a little more formality. From the side, the car looks impossibly balanced. No fat, no wasted gesture. From above, the flared rear haunches and waistline suggest muscle without aggression. It is a design that doesn't shout, it just looks right. When the first prototypes appear in 1955, the reaction is immediate. This is one of the most beautiful cars BMW has ever attempted. In an era of tail fins and chrome excess, the 507 is understated, almost architectural, and all the more striking for it. BMW unveils the 507 to the public at the 1955 Frankfurt Motor Show. The press dubs it the BMW sensation and the dream of the Isar. After the river that runs through Munich, crowds gather around the white prototype, drawn by its low stance, V8 badgework, and the promise of a German answer to the 300 SL. Under the hood lies BMW's 3.2-liter all-aluminium V8, derived from the 502 saloon, but tuned for more power. In final production form, it produces around 150 horsepower at 5,000 revolutions per minute, enough for a top speed of roughly 205 kilometers per hour. Serious numbers for a roadster in the mid-1950s. The car rides on a shortened 502 chassis with torsion bar suspension and powerful drum brakes. The interior is minimal but elegant. Twin round instruments, thin steering wheel, simple switchgear and leather seats that seem to float above the floor. Hoffman's vision is ambitious. He imagines BMW building up to 5,000 507s a year, most of them for the US, turning BMW into a face-to-face rival for Mercedes in the American luxury sports market. But there is a problem hidden behind the spotlights and flashbulbs. Almost everything about the 507 is expensive. The hand-formed aluminium body panels, the small volume V8, the labor-intensive assembly. By the time BMW finishes the maths, the car Hoffman wanted to sell for around $5,000 looks more like a $10,000 proposition. That's more than a 300 SL Gullwing. The dream Roadster has just priced itself out of its own market. Production of the BMW 507 begins in late 1956. Each car is almost a one-off, bodies hammered and welded by hand, details changing as BMW refines the design mid-run. The Series 1 cars have smaller fuel tanks and different dashboards. Series 2 examples gain revisions including a larger tank to address the limited range. Color combinations are often individual. Many cars leave the factory in unique shades chosen by their first owners. On the road, the 507 delivers the right kind of sensations. The all-alloy V8 is smooth and eager, with a deep, refined growl rather than a harsh bark. Performance is brisk rather than brutal, but paired with the car's low weight and close ratio 4-speed gearbox, it makes for relaxed high-speed touring. But every single one costs BMW money. Instead of the thousands of units Hoffman dreamed of, total production from 1956 to 1959 stalls at around 252 to 254 cars, depending on source. BMW loses money on every example, contributing to losses of around 15 million Deutsche Mark by 1959. By the end of the decade, the company is in serious trouble. Talk of a takeover by Daimler-Benz surfaces. BMW's future as an independent manufacturer hangs in the balance. Ironically, the car built to boost BMW's image has become one of the anchors threatening to pull it under. If sales figures were disappointing, the 507's clientele was anything but. Racing driver Hans Stuck campaigned 507s in Hillclimbs across Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, using the car's torque and traction to good effect on twisting mountain roads. BMW's elegant Roadster once more blurred the line between Grand Tour and competition machine. Then came the kind of publicity you can't buy, Elvis Presley. Stationed in Germany with the US Army in late 1958, Elvis leased a white BMW 507, chassis number 779, previously used by Stuck as a competition car. Fans quickly discovered which car belonged to the king. Teenagers scrawled messages and phone numbers in red lipstick across its white paint after concerts and sightings. Eventually, the Roadster was repainted red to hide the stains, an Elvis spec modification that would later add to its legend. Other celebrities followed. Ursula Andress, Alain Delon, and other European stars chose the 507 for its combination of style and exclusivity. Yet even with that showroom glamour, BMW still couldn't make the numbers work. The 507 had become an icon among the elite, but that wasn't enough to save it as a business case. On paper, the 507's numbers are respectable. Around 150 horsepower from a 3.2-liter V8, 4-speed manual, rear-wheel drive, top speed just over 200 kilometers per hour. From behind the wheel, it feels more special than the spec sheet suggests. You sit low, close to the rear axle, with a long hood stretching ahead, and the slim twin-kidney grille marking the centerline. The steering is unassisted but light once moving, full of feedback through the thin rim. The V8 pulls cleanly from low revs, building a cultured, almost American-sounding rumble that turns into a smooth, sustained surge as the revs climb. The chassis is tuned more for balance and comfort than razor-sharp aggression. On a sweeping road, the 507 feels like a true Grand Tourer. Stable, composed, happiest at a fast-flowing pace, rather than being wrung out at the limit. It is, above all, a relaxing fast car. Exactly what Hoffman had imagined for American highways. Something you could drive from New York to Miami without arriving exhausted and still look like a movie star stepping out. That effortless character, paired with the design, is what later made collectors fall in love with it, long after the accountants had closed the books in despair. By 1959, BMW stops 507 production. The costs are too high, the volume's too low, and the company's finances are in crisis. It takes the intervention of industrialist Herbert Quandt, who becomes BMW's major shareholder, to inject fresh capital and prevent a takeover or collapse. New, simpler, and more affordable models like the BMW 700 and the new Class 1500 sedan eventually pull the company back to safety. For years, the 507 is remembered mostly as a cautionary tale, a beautiful misstep, proof that a small company cannot hand-build a glamorous V8 Roadster for a mass market that doesn't exist. Then the collector world catches up. By the 1980s and 90s, surviving 507s become hot property at major auctions. Their numbers are tiny, barely 250 built, fewer still intact, and their design has aged better than almost anything else from the era. Prices climb into the millions. A well-documented car can fetch more than $5 million under the hammer. Elvis's long-lost 507 is rediscovered in a Californian barn in the 2000s, then painstakingly restored by BMW Group Classic to its original white specification and shown at Pebble Beach in 2016. The image of the King's Roadster, reborn, cements the car's dual identity as both pop culture artifact and design icon. Today, the 507 stands as one of BMW's most coveted classics, the sort of car that defines an entire brand's early design language in a single glance. So what do we do with the BMW 507 now? Is it a failure we've chosen to forget, or a masterpiece we've chosen to forgive? Stand next to one in a quiet hall, and it's hard to think about balance sheets. The proportions are so calm, the surfacing so clean, that it feels more like sculpture than a product, as if someone sketched the idea of a perfect roadster and then simply refused to compromise. Yet the numbers are still there in the background. The tiny production run, the losses per car, the near miss with bankruptcy that forced BMW to rethink everything and eventually build the practical sedans and coupes that made it a global powerhouse. Maybe that's why the 507 still fascinates. It reminds us that a company's worst business decision can also produce its most enduring object of desire, that beauty and risk often travel together, and that sometimes the car that almost killed a brand ends up defining its soul. As the lights in the vault fade and the echo of that small block V8 dies away, the file on the BMW 507 closes for tonight. But somewhere, in a museum, a private collection, or idling outside a seaside hotel at sunset, a white or silver roadster waits to prove that being too beautiful for its time is another way of being timeless. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to the Car Story Vault for more slow cinematic journeys through automotive history.